Okay, welcome to the beautiful Point King Beach. There's some local pedestrians up there, but you can see that Union Jack flag up there. That is the first Union Jack flown in Victorian soil. It was flown in March of 1802, and it was claimed for George III, King George III, of ruler of England and Ireland at the time, and claimed in his name, and it was called Point King. And originally at that time, Port Phillip Bay was called Point King as well, but it was later named Port Phillip. It's a very historical beach, jam-packed with history. You can see all of these piers, all of these buildings. They're all pretty much sand-locked. You can imagine why a pier over sand is sort of useless. And I'll talk about all of that in a moment. It's hugely part of due to the geographical landscape of Port Phillip Bay. Now, we are on Burrong land. I'd like to pay respects to the elders, emerging past, present and future of the Burrong people, and pay respect and recognise that this is their land. I'm going to talk about the shape of Port Phillip Bay, the history of it, a little bit about the Burrong people and why it all sort of ties together. Okay, I've made a little makeshift drawing here of sort of the southern end of Victoria, really. We are currently located, if I grab a nice little shell, right here at the tip of the Moynta Peninsula. This shell just there, perfect throw, is Melbourne. Over here, Geelong. This here is French Island. This here is Phillip Island. Down here, this big lovely shell, Wilson's Promontory. And then things like Frankston, Eildon for you, Tash, somewhere over there, something like that. All of this ties in together. So 10,000 years ago, Port Phillip Bay, this mama here, wasn't actually a bay. It was all swampland. So it was a completely different ecosystem. You can see up there, it's about 1,900 square kilometers in size. It was all rolling greens, freshwater river source coming from the Yarra, meaning the Yarra didn't stop at Melbourne. Where's my stick? My stick. The Yarra didn't stop at Melbourne. It zigzagged through all the way, what's now known as Port Phillip Bay, out into the heads, creating a really unique bottom of what's known as Port Phillip Bay. Now that we know that Port Phillip Bay used to be all swampland, there's a Dreamtime story on how it became a bay itself. Now, the Burrong people of this land here, which I'll talk about in a moment with that scaled out little picture there, and the Wadawurrung people here on Geelong, obviously it looks a little bit different, but that's the side. They actually started feuding over this land, which is really against Indigenous culture. The reason they started feuding is it was so prosperous. It had this freshwater river source rolling through, rolling greens in between, not mountains, but higher sea levels, higher areas on both sides, and then the saltwater Bass Strait on this side here. It was so prosperous that they started to fight over it. This really angered two gods in particular. They angered Bunjil and Wa. Now, Bunjil is the eagle protector god of the Indigenous people, and Wa is the god of knowledge and waterways. Those two gods worked together, raised the sea levels, creating what's now known as Port Phillip Bay, and the reason being, it separated the Burrong people and the Wadawurrung people, stopped them from being able to feud. But what they knew was that it would affect their livelihood. So what they decided to do was, if I take a step up, they brought in the Burrong dolphins. Now, because of the sun angle and it's a little bit choppy today, it's going to be hard to see, but just over there, it's really shallow. All through here is about knee depth. Really suddenly, it drops off to about 6-7 meters deep. And Bunjil and Wa, they brought in the Burrong dolphins, and the Burrong dolphins use that to their advantage. What they do is they herd fish in from the deep water into the shallow, almost trapping them in a corner, so to speak. And the Burrong and the Wadawurrung people noticed this. They would hunt with the dolphins, creating a really beautiful symbiotic relationship. And this lasted for thousands of years, and still in place today, with legislations and areas that are protected just for the purpose of protecting the Burrong dolphins. Now, more on the Burrong people. They have been on this land for up to 40,000 years. They've been here for ages. They've looked after it so well. The Burrong people actually refer to their land as the kangaroo. Now, you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit because I'm a terrible drawer, but this is the head, the first arm, the pouch, the leg bouncing off, and then Melbourne is sort of like the tail. That's the kangaroo there. Hopefully you can see that. Really, really cool. Now, we've spoken a little bit about how Port Phillip Bay came to be, but I want to speak about the effects it has had on modern day environments. Now, obviously, this is all filled up with water, but things like tanker ships, Melbourne being the biggest port in all of Australia, it has got tanker ships coming through every single day, all of the time, 365 days of the year. Now, you'd think it would just go through their heads here, beeline it for Melbourne. Originally, they did do that before they realised that because it used to be a swampland, it is incredibly, incredibly shallow. It's got an average depth of about 13 metres. And as I said before, it's 1,900 square kilometres in size. So for something that is as big as some countries, it is really, really shallow. Those tanker ships can go underneath the water by about 20, 25 metres. So they seriously need much more area to get through. So what they have to do, and it took about 100 shipwrecks to figure this out, is follow the old path of the Yarra. Now, obviously it doesn't look quite like this, but they have to follow the old path, otherwise they'll run aground and crash and sink and lose all of their stuff. So they have to follow this and then head up to Melbourne. Now, this has caused some problems. It's really, really shallow, really dangerous. They've put in place a pilot ship over on the other side over there on Queenscliff. They have to have certain people who are seriously skilled to pilot them through this little area here. This is only 2.2 kilometers in width, and it's super shallow. They go from there to there, then the pilot ship hops off and the other pilot does the rest. They've made some efforts to make this easier though. So in 2007, they did what's called dredging the heads. So they brought in a ship over from East Europe. They bombed it, they dug it up, did everything they could to make it wider so the ship could easily get water. And there was a big uproar in the local community for lots of good reasons, which they sort of ignored. The reasons they ignored were, it's obviously going to bring in a lot more swell, a lot more water rushing in, and that's going to affect the local environment. But they ignored it. They said it's going to bring in an extra $2 billion worth into the economy of Melbourne. That was their big promise. They did it. Ships came through. It was a massive failure. Only about an additional 4 ships a year were able to fit through because the sand just filled back in, but the damage was already done. So extra swell and water comes through here and gets picked up and really affects these beaches along here. If I stand up and hop on here, you can see, as I spoke about earlier, all of these piers are over the sand, which doesn't really make much sense. 15 years ago or so, my boss used to run kayak tours, kayaking underneath these piers, just like that. But the sand has all been taken from Portsea Beach and washed up here. It's all completely new. It's really affected certain animals such as the weedy sea dragon, who is an incredibly delicate, incredibly rare creature. It's really affected their livelihood. In fact, they've dropped down and lost a lot of population through that. But it's also affected just the local economy. Now, these houses, obviously I'm in a very affluent area right now. These houses are crazy, to put it frankly, rich. In fact, funny story, that house there, it is Lindsay Fox's house. He is Lin Fox Trucks, the biggest distributor in Australia. That is his house there. He read his property clause when he saw that all of this sand was coming in. He said, actually, I've got an opportunity here. What is my property clause? He read it. He said to the high tide line, he said, well, the high tide line is getting much bigger. There's more and more sand coming in every day. So he just said, all right, and just started turfing his land, completely adding about an extra 2 blocks worth of property. So that one there, Lindsay Fox's house. That one there is his beach house, and you can't see it, but there's another house there which is also his. And that beach house, all because of this extra sand came in. He started turfing it and building a house. He even built, oh, I'll zoom out for you, a helicopter pad right in front of his house. Takes him 7 minutes to get from there to Melbourne, which is that way. So it's a pretty cheeky little ordeal he's done there. Slightly off topic, but Daniel Andrews, back in COVID times, when he had his fall, he actually fell down in that house. But the reason I mention all this, the dredging of the heads, the effect it had on the local environment is massive. I'm walking on this massive, near 100-meter sandbank that just wasn't here. It's completely changed the environment. Now the ocean's forever changing, but the process and the decision to dredge the heads sped that up by probably about 100 years and really affected the local environment. Really crazy story. And with that crazy story, I'm going to wrap up this presentation at the beautiful Point King Beach. Super jam-packed full of stories. I couldn't fit it all in 10 minutes. I'm probably well over, but a beautiful image with lots and lots of beautiful history.